Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Leadership in Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I have Paul Unwin. Paul is works in the Highways England under Smart Motorways, and he is behavioural assessor for the collaborative delivery framework. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, thanks, and it's good to be here, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable time. It's much appreciated. So what I'd like to start off by asking, as I ask everybody, is how did you get into construction?
Well, like most people, it was a very circuitous route. So my degree was in the history of art and architecture and design. I was always good at art. I did technical drawing, and I used to kind of find myself in the library looking at kind of house plan books and stuff like that, and art books. So I was always interested in kind of the visual and how things worked. And so after I'd done my degree, I was looking for something in that line. I wanted to be in the Historic Buildings and Monuments Commission, kind of listing buildings, and I'd spent some time with a guy doing that. Lovely kind of going around and looking at different styles of architecture. So I applied for the civil service, did the civil service exams, passed those, and in their wisdom, the civil service commissioners put me in something called the Property Services Agency, which then was a part of the Department of Environment. And I find myself doing procurement on RAF bases for the United States Air Force. So I started a bit like yourself on runways and aprons and doing the kind of surfacing there, but also everything that went into an RAF base. That could be a commissary, it could be a firing range, it could be a school. So from 86 to 91, that's what I did. Based in Croydon, just doing kind of procurement. So that was my introduction to kind of construction. And then from 95, I kind of transferred to the dark side, if you like, away from procurement into project management at the start of the kind of Smart Motorways program later on in 2004.
Oh, fantastic. So again, it was sort of, like you say, completely by accident, you sort of fell into sort of construction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on the industry as a whole?
Thoughts on the industry? I mean, I love it. I mean, it's lovely. Actually, going around now, and you can see things that you've been part of. Going around probably every motorway in the country. From the M25, M1, M5, M6, M42. There's a bit of me in there. Of part of a great team that we're making a difference, keeping the country moving, connecting families, connecting people, and I take a lot of pride in that. I can get a bit nerdy. Obviously, you look at bits of barrier, and you look at bits of structures and signs and signals, and quite safely, obviously, from the passenger seat, if I can. But it's great, seeing something from the start, what you want to achieve, and you're getting the benefits out of them as well. So it's great to see. I get a lot of pride out of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel the sort of same as well. When you have the chance, especially I'm a designer, so I spend a lot of my time looking at things in CAD and on paper, and then eventually things start to take shape and form in the ground. And then next time I'm flying off from, say, Birmingham or Gatwick or something, I can point to something and say, I was involved in that. And you do have a sense of pride. It's your mark on the world, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Really important. Yeah.
So you work on Smart Motorways at the moment, that's correct. And for those that might not know, and just to educate myself a little bit, what is a Smart Motorway?
Okay, so it's something we started in about 2004, and we found that to create extra capacity on the motorway network, widening schemes were very, very expensive. So we looked at utilising the hard shoulder as a running lane, and also introducing variable speed limits. So the first one we did was the M42, not far away from where I am here in Stratford-on-Avon, kind of working in Birmingham, but that's along the M42 around Solihull, Birmingham Airport, the NEC. And that was a good location, kind of had a real good mix of traffic, a lot of commuter traffic, but a lot of event traffic as well for the NEC and the airport. So that was a good sort of test bed. So Smart Motorways are best introduced in sort of urban areas around cities to combat congestion at real peak times and make use of that extra capacity as a running lane, particular, in the morning peak 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 in the afternoon. So in those earlier schemes, on what we call dynamic hard shoulder running schemes, we turned on and off the hard shoulder at those peak times, 7 to 9, 4 to 6, and for any events, obviously at the NEC. Now we've got kind of different iterations of that. We've looked at it, and that's kind of morphed into something we call ALR, which is all lane running, in which we keep the hard shoulder on 24/7 all the time. And it's kind of, we feel that's the best iteration for it now. I think we had to go through those different iterations. It's the first time we tried it on the M42, but it's not a static state, and we're always developing what smart motorways look like. It went through, the first time it was called active traffic management, then it went through being called managed motorways, and now it's smart motorways, and no doubt it'll change and develop in the future as well.
Because I suppose it's not only the road construction, I suppose, that's involved in this. There's a whole lot of systems and control technology that has to be involved as well.
It is. It's largely technology-led. We're not really touching the pavement very much at all. What we have got in the pavement is something called MIDAS loops, so motorway incident detection automatic signalling, and they give us a huge amount of data and information about the number of vehicles and the speed of vehicles. And what we do, we use that data to through an algorithm to turn on the signs and signals for us to bring in those variable speed limits. So at the onset on congestion, from about 7:30 in the morning, the loops recognise that and will bring the speed limits down from 70 to 60 to 50. So smoothing the vehicle through, so you haven't got those kind of annoying stop-start conditions and a kind of full stop, and it smooths traffic through. So it provides more regular, reliable journey times and extra capacity, and it's a lot safer as well. You don't get those kind of rear end shunts from traffic think they can travel at 70 miles an hour, suddenly coming to the back of a queue that's either dawdling at 2 or 3 miles an hour or stationary. So it's avoided a lot of those incidents as well. So huge amount of benefits from motorways.
So I sort of compare it to like on a drainage system where you're trying to control the flow of water by adjusting a valve or something like that. You're just sort of slowing down where it's coming out the other end, so it's not all coming at once and then flooding. That sort of thing.
It's a really good analogy. It's one that I use in presentations. It's fluid dynamics, really. If you're trying to get a lot of fluid through, through a spout, if you widen that spout, then the fluid can kind of go through much easier. So it's a really good analogy, and one that I use in kind of universities and schools when I go into it and try and explain it in kind of simple terms. Actually, you're through the slot, if you like, to make the slot wider, then that's going to be improve your fluid flow and hence your traffic flow. Yeah.
And is there any data in terms of environmental benefits? Because a lot of congestion leads to a lot of standing cars running on idle, emitting gases. Is there data on that?
We have. So on every scheme we produce kind of before and after data. On that first scheme we did on the M42, because we were trying to prove the concept, we did a kind of 3 years before and 3 years after study, and that's publicly available. Just kind of Google M40 ATM kind of studies, or before and after studies and monitoring, and it produced some really interesting results. So we got benefits of reductions in kind of emissions of between 4% and 10% of the worst. Because two things are happening. You're bringing the speed of the vehicles down to kind of their optimum of 50, 60 miles an hour. So they're kind of not kicking out so much emissions as they would be at kind of 70, 80 miles an hour or 10 or 20. So you're getting more fuel economy out of your engine. That's the first thing. But also, you're right, standing, especially in the heavy goods vehicles as well, kind of standing vehicles are just highly pollutant, and that's not great for neighbours either. The other benefit of smart motorways is we're building within our highways boundary, so we're not taking away huge amount of trees or properties as well. So they're pretty green really for us, which is great too, in part of our agenda going forward.
Brilliant. And so in terms of bringing this around to sort of the topic of leadership, then those sort of schemes are quite huge schemes, and they take years of construction. I've gone up and down the M42 to get to Birmingham Airport. I've lived through the construction of what they're going on, and and use smart motorways. So these are not small schemes; these are very sizable schemes, and it must involve a huge amount of stakeholder engagement. Can you give us any insight in terms of what it's like in terms of stakeholder engagement?
Yeah, they are huge schemes. So typically, 150 million, 200 million, and I've got one at the moment on the M1 around Northampton, junction 13 to 16, which is 373 million pounds. So massive by anybody's standards. But I kind of like those schemes, and it is absolutely how we bring those to fruition with consulting stakeholders. So, and kind of a very wide range of those. First of all, the emergency services. We did a lot of work, and I did a lot of work personally with the fire, police, and ambulance, because they were kind of very protective of the hard shoulder for access to incidents. And what I did is show them that we can get you to an incident through any lane by using the signs and signals. Once we've shown them that, they get there quicker. And also, because we've got lots of cameras out there, we can tell them from our control room what state the incident is before they get there, so they can be preparing and be taking the right equipment. Kind of traditionally, the fire service on a motorway, when they get a call in from the public maybe doesn't quite know where they are. So what the fire service do is send out two tenders, one up the North Corridor and one the South. With us, we can pinpoint exactly to the marker post where that incident is, so they can save on the resources there. But also, because of the safety record on smart motorways, a lot less incidents anyway. Part of the work that we did was ask them to bring in the kind of rotors and the charts of what it was like, and afterwards. And it was quite a short meeting afterwards. Said, well, there have been very few incidents, so a lot better for them. A lot to do with neighbours as well, because we do have to work with neighbours. We put in low noise surfacing, we put in kind of fencing, environmental barriers in these areas. But our neighbours do get very attached to the flora and fauna around them. I can't understand that, so we always put in a kind of replanting scheme as well. So it's working with parish councillors, working with local MPs. I kind of enjoy that, actually. I enjoy the politics of that, and I enjoy going on the media and talking about the schemes and talking about the benefits of the schemes. So I'm got a familiar face on some TV, but I've got a very good face for radio, though.
So in terms of the stakeholder engagements, then, are these through public consultations or one-on-one meetings?
Yeah, what we
usually the format.
Yeah, so it's slightly different to what we call a kind of public inquiry or a DCO. Because we're working within the highways boundary, we don't have to kind of consult on that aspect. But what we do, and it's really, really important that we do that, is something called a PI, which is a public information exhibition. And we'll do 2 or 3 of those, one very, very early doors to say, this is happening at some point in the future, in kind of a year or so. But then we'll do a pre-construction one, and we'll go out and we'll do them digitally as well. We can show plans and do it through this format. Just look at their houses, their kind of their viewpoint. It's usually the kind of neighbours who are interested in where the gantry is going to go. And we can try and move gantries around us as far as possible, but trying to keep within the design standards as well, because certain bits of kit have to be in a particular kind of position, and the number of emergency refuge areas, or emergency areas as they're called now, about every kind of 60 seconds, 75 seconds apart. But yeah, and so we get the MPs to those, we get neighbours, we'll get businesses as well. Businesses are really interested in what we're doing because we're keeping that flow of traffic running. Really, really important for businesses when they're looking to kind of locate in a particular area, that they can get their goods to market and their people to work. So that's why we find a lot of our motorway junctions, you see a lot of development around those, because and they like a free flowing network. So you'll see across the network a lot of big, massive Amazon style warehouses popping up at the side of most of our major motorways. It's because of the work we're doing out there, keeping motorways flowing.
Mm-hmm. And so the sort of the key leadership skills that I'm hearing from that are mostly sort of listening to your neighbours, understanding where they're coming at it from, but also effective communication. So they seem like very important skills. Are there any other sort of skills in terms of leadership that you would look to in terms of these projects?
I think so, and I think it's around tone as well, of how you have those conversations. Sometimes they can be quite difficult ones if we are taking kind of trees down. It's explaining why we're doing it, but also explaining what we're going to put in its place. Explaining sometimes the benefits, often around the safety benefits of smart motorways as well, can be quite difficult sometimes. But it's having the right data and kind of not preaching. I'm not saying, we're engineers, we know best. Thank you very much, go away. I think in the years gone by, many years ago, potentially, I think the industry maybe have been quite arrogant and kind of we know best. I think now I feel more comfortable in this kind of more collaborative approach that we have, and certainly within the industry as well as a client with designers and contractors. That's the environment I like to work in, and people are more sophisticated now as well, and got a better understanding of what's going on, rather as maybe 20, 30 years ago it was okay, that's the Department of Transport, the officials in suits. Now we try and meet people at weekends and in evenings and at times when people are around to have a discussion, and it's how you challenge. And I think it's, as I say, the tone to do that. I'm really open to challenge, and when I challenge other people, is to have a conversation and to find out their perspectives. It's not challenging to belittle somebody else's point of view. I think that's really important for us to bear in mind as kind of leaders and engineers as well.
And within these communications, have you found challenges that you've had to overcome in any of the conversations you've had?
I think so, yeah. I mean, go back to the emergency services, that was quite a challenge because, certainly the police and the police sort of federation officers definitely felt that the hard shoulder was their territory and it's theirs, and you're taking away my how I get to incidents. But again, what I did is put down a really good presentation, and I actually took with me a police officer as an advocate, one of the people who kind of got it. And I find that's really, really useful in some conversations. You can find an advocate who is one of their own, because again, they may not trust me, a kind of official in a suit, but if I've got a police officer kind of in a uniform who says, no, Paul's explained it to me and I get it, and you listen to me, I know how it's going on. So we always try and find an advocate, somebody who's actually worked on traffic, for example, and has seen, the carnage that goes on out there where we haven't had cameras, where we haven't had variable speed limits, and hasn't seen the benefits of us using those cameras and that technology to get to incidents, but also to have less incidents. So that's kind of typical one that we'd have, and real challenges over that I think we've largely overcome now. There's still pockets where, of the country where we haven't done smart motorways yet, but certainly in the Midlands, the North and the kind of Southeast, kind of most people get it and understand it, and it's designed to be intuitive anyway. We won't send people out with a leaflet of how to drive a smart motorway. We all drive every day on lots of different types of roads, yourself and me. So I live in a kind of a little housing estate here, so it's kind of little local roads with a school that demands a certain driving style. Then you go into a town, kind of different driving style than a dual carriageway, maybe a toll road, and all different driving styles that we and we do a lot of that kind of subconsciously and intuitively, but it's our role as kind of designers to kind of visualize that and work that through. So and that's what we do to make it safe.
That's what I really want to get into talking about leadership, but that was one of the things I was just sort of picking up from that is we've not changed all of a sudden how we drive or the standards in which we drive in. So in designing some effectively new infrastructure to change how the motorways are used, the designers must have relied on the existing standards that everybody knows. It's taught from roughly the age of 17.
Yeah.
That must have been quite a challenge in terms of the design and making sure that everything wasn't out of the ordinary. It was just standards, what everybody's used to. The speed signals and. Did you were involved in the design side of things in that respect?
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, all the signs and signals had to work with something called TSRGD, traffic signs, regulations, general directions. We had to add some kind of nuance to that. We had to put some new questions in the highway code, for example, around red X's and what those meant when a lane is closed. Shows that's quite interesting. Working on that. Yeah. Our risk assessments kind of changed because we're using the kind of hard shoulder. We've introduced emergency areas as well, so entering and exit an emergency area, kind of new signs and signals and new questions around that. But that's exciting, and that's a part of my job I like. I'm not a great one for kind of doing repetitive and procedural stuff. I like being at the cutting edge and working with others in that space, if you like, of something new, and that's why Smart Motorways. It's kind of kept me really since all these years, since 2004. We're always looking at different approaches and making the best use of the kind of skills and taking that step further. We're living in a very exciting time of change in transportation and vehicles as well. Moving into kind of connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and we need to be kind of in the room with those discussions. We are. We're working with lots of manufacturers in Highways England and lots of different academic institutions of what the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years is going to look like on the motorway landscape.
I'd love to come on to that a bit later, but for now, can I ask, so you must be part of a team. You must be working, I assume that you're not a sole, Mr. Highways England. There must be a team of people that you work with. Can you tell me why leadership is so important?
Absolutely. Really, as I said earlier, it's leaders set the tone and the direction of any project that you're dealing with. And my approach as a leader is really listen to those different perspectives, take it all on board, consult, collaborate. But the important thing as a leader is then to take a decision. And it's maybe not always a popular decision, but at least you kind of learnt, and you've heard all the different views, and you weigh up the pros and cons. Very few kind of decisions we take are kind of binary. There are always going to be an element of risk and pros and cons in each one. So it's finding the kind of best solution that kind of answers most of the questions. It's a bit like when we're part of my role is producing business cases and looking at the benefits, looking at the costs and benefits, and we do a cost benefit analysis on that. So for any scheme to go through, it's got to have a decent BCR, as we call it, benefit cost ratio. Same with a lot of decisions we have. So, and we learn through those discussions as well. I said earlier about not being kind of complacent and not being thinking that we know best. Sometimes we have kind of adapt some of our ideas as well. And I think a good leader listens and adapts their approach. I've in the past kind of worked with some kind of very, very directive leaders, and that's an approach as well. They've been very, very firm in their opinions, and that's definitely an approach. But I think mine is to kind of just step back a bit and let the team come up with some of the ideas as well. I think a leader kind of gives ownership and gives permission for the team to have ideas. And really encourages that. Some of the older type of kind of leadership approaches has very much been, I think, this is how it's going to be, and follow this, because that's kind of their vision. Mine is different to that. It's this is what we want to achieve, but you're really clever people that we've employed. How can together we achieve that? And I think we're richer of it. And in working for other leaders in the past, I've grown through that, as I say, having that permission to give my opinion, even if it's quite a poor one sometimes. it's at least I've felt comfortable and in a safe space to do that. So what I do as a leader is try and achieve that with my team, give them permission to have and ask any questions or input their own views, listen to those views and appreciate different perspectives. And that creates a much kind of healthier and nicer place to work. You know, we spend a lot of time at work. We want to enjoy it. I enjoy the company of others. I enjoy the company of kind of colleagues and their different perspectives and views. And you know, that's what makes the kind of workplace much happier and a great place to be.
Now, there's a couple of things out there that I think are very interesting. The first one I wanted to ask about was what are the adverse effects then for that other style of leadership, where it's very much directing, this is how it's got to be done, you know, with no questions asked, just do as you're told sort of thing. What are the adverse effects around that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, sometimes that's kind of needed. I kind of use the military and the kind of fire service as one, and the police to a certain extent. You know, if a building's on fire, you don't have a discussion of the pros and cons of getting out of the building. It's leave the building now. You know, and that's a kind of very kind of binary thing. But there are very few what I call kind of building on fire discussions. Yeah, very few. That kind of most leaders have got time to consider and think about the issues and going through it. There are pressured times when, you know, it's time to kind of actually, you know, we're on a deadline here. It's time to stop discussion. We've had some discussion and now we've got to go and do this. I think probably in the past, far too many leaders have had that building on fire type discussion rather than a consultative approach. And I call it kind of walking the line as well. When we talk about the different types of personalities and leadership, I think we don't have to, again, pigeon ourselves into holes of I'm always consultative or I'm always the kind of building on fire type. You know, we look at the situation and we take a view. That helped me in my career. Well, once that kind of dawned on me years ago, so yeah, I can adapt my style and my views to the particular, you know, kind of situation and how critical it is to make that decision. So we've always got the kind of program in the back of our mind. And, you know, you're a designer as well. We can optioneer to death, you know, lots of schemes. Yeah, absolutely. We don't always want to fall into that trap, because at some point we've got to make a decision and say, and you learn from experience how much time to spend on this, but actually then make that decision, move forward and go for it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way of explaining it, you know, having the building on fire discussion versus the consultation type discussion. And it's interesting to understand that that's a situational approach. There are times when you've got to sit down and listen to others and consult, but there are times when you've got to take charge and say, no, we've got to make a decision, we've got to pin this down and run with it. That's really interesting. And the other part I wanted to ask was about decision making. And I think decision making is very important in terms of a leader. And what are the challenges that you can face with having that time to come to make a decision? Because I found in the past that some leaders aren't decision makers. Therefore, we sort of feel slightly directionless.
Yeah.
You know, that has a bit of an effect on the team, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's again with different personalities and different perspectives. It's understanding, you know, how different people in your team will respond to that. Some people in teams really like a kind of set job description and that is it, and process driven. Other people, I kind of like my job description to be a kind of like a blank piece of paper to give me that flexibility to you know, kind of work things out and bring my own sort of approach to it. So for me as a leader, the best teams have all those different types of personality in them, you know, and you've probably heard of, and people who are watching this have probably heard of Discovery's Insights and MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, and we've all kind of done that, and I do advocate it for anybody who's not done a Myers-Briggs, just to find out what your personality type is. Mine turns out to be kind of campaigner, so I've kind of passions about things. In leadership, I'll try and bring over that passion and my vision. And what I find is people kind of hook into that. And that kind of excites them. So that creates an environment where they'll want to input because they're brought into the vision, and they'll want to kind of, join in. Again, part of the issues around that is, as we talked earlier, is you can kind of optioneer a lot of that, and at some point you've got to kind of come to a conclusion and say, right, we're going to go with that. Now, my hope is that kind of the majority around are up for that, and through my career that's how it's been. But sometimes, some people will lose out in that discussion, and that's kind of just a fact of life. You can't please everybody, and as a leader, if you're trying to please everybody, that's not going to happen. It can be a lonely position sometimes, kind of leadership, but that comes with it. But again, it's the tone that you have that discussion, with that person, and you won't let them feel that they failed or anything like that. It's really promoting and encouraging to come up with those ideas, and just saying, look, on this occasion that didn't particularly work, but you know what, thank you. And I tend to give kind of appreciation to team members when kind of things maybe didn't work out. I think it's easy to give appreciation when everything's gone right and you kind of pat on the back and it's great, and not do that as well, of course. But sometimes I think leaders, when things go wrong, can bring in a sort of blame culture. What happens, and I've seen it, and it's probably happened to me, and no doubt happened to yourself as well, things go wrong, you feel bad enough about it yourself. I don't need somebody else telling me that's gone wrong. And if a leader does that, and again, this is kind of an old school type approach, this kind of blame culture can really damage and that's a damaging behavior, can damage that person. And in the future, they won't come up with ideas and they won't take risks. So, I want to encourage our team to take risks, bring forward ideas, take ownership, and all those different behaviors. And those are the best teams that I've worked in, and the best leaders I've worked for have done that. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I think I totally mirror exactly what you're saying in there. And certainly the team that I'm working at the moment are very much like that. We're all just trying to keep each other open to explore the boundaries. And if there's something doesn't quite go the way it was meant to, fine, what did we learn from that? And then take it as a positive and move forward. And next time we come across that situation, we've done it before. And we try to do it as a team, all together, not as an individual. So that's
supporting
brilliant.
Each other, and just particularly now as well under COVID, there's an extra kind of mental health and welfare around that as well. So I'm spending a lot of time having kind of discussions. We all have kind of one-to-ones. I'm sure most organisations do. I always say my kind of one-to-ones are really just 3 questions. The first one is, how are you? The second one is, no, how are you? And the third one is, well, how are you really? And it's often, it takes a third question before it gets to that, because I think we're all pretty good of having this kind of mask sometimes of, yeah, I'm all right. And then, well, actually, am I? Have I checked in with myself? In my one-to-ones, I call it kind of, it's checking in, not checking up. Checking in with people, how are you really? And it's okay to have a bad day, especially now under COVID. We think, I'm feeling a bit down today. Well, actually, pre-COVID, we had kind of bad days as well. So why wouldn't you have the odd bad day now? And it's being with people and helping people through that. I think it is harder for a lot of people, all in different circumstances, whether you've got kind of young children at home or whatever. You're not just working, you're a parent and you're a teacher as well in many cases.
Yeah.
It's really difficult. And as leaders, again, we've got to respect that and encourage and support people through that, through more flexibility of hours and getting out during the daytime for a break as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm like most of the people, I've had my children come up into meetings on the camera and interrupt it, which is always interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously leadership as well. Am I right in thinking it's not a role or a position within an organisation as such? Is that fair to say? Or...
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we're all leaders at some point. We support our colleagues. We work in teams. What I like to do is, in developing, I'm a kind of mentor as well for kind of graduates and others in the business and apprentices. The best thing you can do is give somebody a project with a bit of ownership. So give them a bit of leadership to do. bit of responsibility around that. I'm still accountable. I'm still responsible for the output. But again, I won't dictate, thou shalt do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. Because people, aren't processors, aren't machines. They will bring a very different perspective to it, probably something that I haven't even seen. So leadership can be at any level. And I really, really encourage it. Because once you start doing it, you'll want to do it even more. And, leadership isn't being bossy. Leadership is taking responsibility. It's including others. It's valuing contributions for me. So, really think about what leadership means to you, anybody watching this, and think about what your style of leadership is and how that's coming across. Also, that it's not a static state. In my 20s, I was leading different to now in my mid 50s. And you move with the times. What was probably okay then definitely isn't okay now. We've got to recognize diversity and inclusion a lot more, and that people want a voice, especially if you want to kind of attract and retain good people, because good people won't stay if they're not being treated, if they're not being listened to, if their perspective isn't being listened to, and especially around the kind of diversity and inclusion aspects as well. I do a lot around that with the universities, talking about I call it preparing for the workplace and workplace behaviours. How we really want to kind of include all those different voices and let them be heard, and actually encourage their growth into leadership positions as well. There are too many people who look like me in leadership positions. We call it male, pale and stale. I kind of recognise that, so I'm doing what I can to encourage that diversity inclusion.
And in part, this is why I sort of wanted to start this podcast, because engineers have a very set skills that they use to perform calculations, to work out size of beams, to road thicknesses, to drainage. But as you progress through your career, as you become a member of the Institute of Civil Engineers, whatever institute it is, you eventually find yourselves in potentially higher positions, and the expectation of you having to be a leader now, put in charge of projects, you quickly start to find out that this relies on a whole total different set of skills, nothing that you'd met before. And I certainly met, as I found out, didn't know anything about leadership. And this is part of that journey in terms of trying to find out what leadership is. So in terms of Highways England as an organisation, do you do any training specific for graduates or for recently qualified engineers, what have you, in terms of leadership and management?
Yeah, we have a very good management development program. Actually, we take all our people through that, whether they're graduates or not, or kind of full-time workers. But our graduate scheme is very good. I'm going to sell it, now. Just to take 30 seconds to sell that 3-year program. Different placements at all different teams. You'll have a line manager, you'll have a mentor as well, and I'm privileged to be one of the assessors on the graduates team, and also a mentor as well. And even at that kind of assessment stage, we're looking at potential, and it's being open. And certainly while I'm interviewing, I'm actually probably less interested in the degree subject than their openness and their communication skills and their openness and their flexibility and valuing others. I find it much easier to train the engineering and the kind of skills than those kind of soft skills. So I will always kind of veer on that side and bring, some of the graduate project managers that we've got now have done politics or sociology or psychology, because through there they've learnt how to communicate. I think, one of the issues sometimes we've probably got in engineering, that sometimes, dare I say, our engineers maybe aren't the best communicators because they haven't been trained. So we need to, absolutely spend more time doing that and giving opportunities to do it. You just have kind of opportunity to experience it. What I try and do is I kind of lead a lot of meetings. I say, just come and observe, and observe a lots of different people. My style is my style. Yours will be different, but they're both valid. And one of the phrases I use is steal with pride. see a bit of that, see a bit of that, and then you'll grow as a person yourself, and you'll find that you are a leader, because you're leading people and people are listening to you and following what you're saying. But kind of work at it, be conscious of, we call it the kind of shadow that you leave. Leaders leave shadows, and our people are watching us all the time for what we say. And what's Paul's attitude to this? How is he thinking about that? So I can recognize kind of we're always on show, so we have a very privileged position on that, and we don't always get it right. And I hope that my kind of people tell me when I get it wrong. I'm open enough to listen to that, and I want to learn as well about what I can do to adapt my style for the next few years and the decades ahead, and I'll have conversations with others when I think they haven't got it quite right, but it'll be an open conversation, is on the lines of how did you think that went, and have you reflected on that? How might you do it differently in future? Not to say you got that wrong. The analogy I use is, so you've got young children, you're teaching them how to ride a bike, for example. What's the first thing that's going to happen when you teach them to ride a bike, Michael?
They're going to fall over a lot, especially if it's my son.
They're going to fall over. And when they fall over, what do? Do you tell them they're rubbish and you're going to take the bike off them?
No, you put your arm around them, don't you, and pick them back up again. So this is all part of life.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of philosophy I try and use with people. Expect our people to fail, because they're going to fall off. As a leader, it's our job to get them back on the bike and to encourage them and say, look, and you may get a bit grazed and you may get a bit hurt, but I'm here to support you because I know that you can do it. And that for me is the type of leadership I really, really like. So helping our people get back on the bike.
It's a really interesting analogy, because a lot of what I've been thinking about whilst I've been learning, at the same time I was becoming a father, because I've got young children, as you said, I see a lot of similarities to being a parent and to being a leader. There's tons and tons of books on leadership, but no one can tell you how to be your leader. There's tons of parenting books, but no one can tell you how to parent. And you're finding your feet in similar ways of trial and error, but also the way you do the encouragement, the way you listen, and the way you communicate has to very similar to the leadership styles. Would you agree with that?
I think so. And I'm a parent as well, but mine are 25 and 23 now. So I always tell everybody the first 18 years are the worst. No, it's not true. It's not true. It's a joy, and they change. But you're right. The problem with kind of parenting books is the children don't read the books, so they don't know how they're supposed to behave. A little bit like leadership as well. If our people don't read the same books, they don't know how they're supposed to behave. Some of it is trial and error in parenting, absolutely. But I think one of the things I learned through parenting, which I've taken into leadership, is just having a kind of being constant, not kind of flip-flopping. Children like routine and to know what to expect. And I think, I come into the office in the morning, and if I'm one type of person one day and then a different type of person the next day, that's going to really upset the team. So I try and always keep a kind of level head of who I am, quite kind of comfortable in my own skin, in my own personality. I know who I am. And that's because I did a lot of work around trying to understand my own personality and my strengths and weaknesses, what I need to work on. So I do come back to that, is I think before we can understand others, we really need to understand ourselves, what drives us, what our passions are. So definitely look at those kind of personalities things. And one great one, actually, I can really recommend. It's free. It takes 12 minutes on Google. It's called 16personalities.com. It's all anonymous. It's frighteningly accurate, actually. So definitely recommend that. 16personalities.com. It's usually the first one that comes up on Google, and that'll give you some really good insights into what makes you tick, and that'll help in your leadership and your kind of approach with team members.
That's really interesting. I'll definitely check that out. Thank you very much. we've got to. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about, and we're coming close to the end now, so I don't want to rush through these. But the first one was about behavioural assessor as part of what your job is. Can you explain a bit more about what that is, and why is that so important? Why do we have that?
Yeah, so it's something that we introduced in Highways England some time ago when we brought on the collaborative delivery framework approach, which was kind of collaborative approach to kind of construction, and really it's around the soft skills of behaviours of collaboration and working together. What we're finding is in lots of schemes, when they go wrong, it can become very confrontational and very blame culture. So what we wanted to do is kind of train or expose kind of team members to some of the issues that can be kind of damaging in construction. So one of the main ones is that sort of blame culture. So something big goes wrong on a project, and because we work on really complex projects, there's no shortage of things that will go wrong. It's then, what behaviours are going to come out of those. And what we do on a lot of schemes is kind of do a survey at the start of every team member of how they're feeling themselves. Do they feel they have a voice? Do they feel when they challenge an opinion that they're listened to? And what we'll do is some of those behaviours in the kind of analysis of the results, some of those behaviours are either kind of damaging or leading. So they're either good experiences or really bad experiences. And what we do, we'll look at the kind of survey results, and I'll just pick that one because there's lots of different areas around kind of trust and accountability as well. But this is kind of the main one, and one that I'm sure everybody will recognise and they'll come across it, was really kind of drill in and probe into, okay, what drove that bad behaviour? And it's usually around people kind of misunderstanding maybe how long it takes to get a piece of information. And once you then, those kind of individuals, and as a facilitator, in a room, we'll have those individuals, I'll facilitate those discussions and say, Fred, you had a problem with Joe over there. Why was that? Well, it's because Joe didn't appreciate me and didn't understand how long it took. And then Joe, what do you think about that? So, I really didn't understand. I thought he could do that in 10 minutes. I didn't recognize it would take him 2 days to do that. And so it's bringing, that's kind of very kind of, high level example. But discussions like that, understanding different perspectives, understanding different views. And what we find is that has a real direct link to productivity as well. And then people being listened to and being encouraged to challenge, but challenge in a meaningful way and a respectful way. Not, that's gone wrong, you're an idiot, get out of here. And, that's not going to achieve anything. You're going to get a very high turnover of people constantly because you keep blaming them and they keep going as well. And that's around, if we turn that around, actually respecting and valuing, you have retention, you build the skills, you build the experience, and they will train others as well. And it's kind of self-fulfilling kind of prophecy. So that's very much it of what BMF, and it's called IBIP as well, which is improving behaviours, improving performance. That's the kind of tagline that we use. There's quite a lot out there on that. Again, Google that, BMF, Behavioural Maturity Framework, or IBIP, improving behaviours, improving performance. And there's quite a bit written on that, and we're quite proud of some of the real differences we made on major projects.
I mean, that's the key thing. If we can improve behaviours, then we are seeing improvement in productivity and improvement in the work that we do. That's brilliant. And this, like, the sharing of information, does that improve? Because knowledge is everything. So from safety to being able to put in adequate designs and build something better, quality, sharing information is key to that, surely.
It absolutely is, because again, if somebody doesn't feel they're going to be listened to, they'll say, well, why should I share that? They're not going to do it. They're not going to listen to anybody. If you create that environment, and it's very much facilitating, creating an environment where people can perform and want to share. So yeah, this is really important. It's a safety issue. Why wouldn't I want to share that with you? And I know you're going to listen and you're going to do it and follow it. And I would expect the same from you. And that's the environment I want to work in. And what I've found is team members want to work in that as well. They're valued, their perspective is valued, they're listened to. You've got a voice. People without a voice shut up.
Very good. So Smart Motorways, what is the future for Smart Motorways? Obviously a lot of talk about autonomous vehicles, fully electrical vehicles. I think the government have come out with a policy now that petrol and diesel cars will be banned from 2030. It's only 10 years away. How is Highways England and the development of Smart Motorways impacted by all this, and what we're doing?
Yeah, we're doing a lot. So, as I say, we're working with manufacturers and academia on what the future could look like. I think there are many futures of what that could look like, and I think I'd be a very rich person if I knew exactly when that was all going to come in. But maybe I can set out that kind of some of the visions of what we're doing as a company. We have a kind of innovations department in our SES, our standards department, who are working with different kind of companies, and we got trial sites of autonomous vehicles kind of running around with JLR and Warwick University. So that's happening now. But I think there's going to be a kind of step and baby steps around that. So the first thing we're doing, and Arup are doing this actually, they're putting in kind of fast chargers around the country. So everybody's within a certain distance of fast charging for vehicles. So that's the first thing. I think we'll have more connected vehicles, as we call them as well. So vehicles talking to vehicles. And what we're doing is looking at the sort of information that we can get from the roadside into the vehicle. So we see all those signs and signals out there. If you can drive along a smart motorways, you'll see the variable speed limits. At some point, we'll be able to get that information into your vehicle. So the vehicle is doing some of that. And then ultimately, we'll be able to take those signs down because all the information is going directly into the autonomous vehicle to do that as well. So that's some years away, but that's the path to do it. So we started on that path. We got fiber optic cables along all our motorways already. So we're kind of digital ready. We need 5G to come along as well, because there's a huge amount of bandwidth around that as well. So it's that kind of convergence of technologies that enables it all to happen, and it's got to be really reliable to happen as well. So we're not anywhere near, I don't think, autonomous as yet, but connected is very, very exciting, because if your vehicle gets into trouble, that vehicle can then be telling other vehicles to avoid me, and almost automatically set diversion routes through your sat nav in your vehicle to do that. And we've seen some of that already in vehicles as well. Lots of kind of safety measures already, kind of adaptive cruise, lane control, and all those kind of things. And it's just those different iterations of that. So we've got to be in the room with the manufacturers, and we are just looking what they're up to, and that they want to hear from us of what's possible as well. Some of the things we're looking at as a department, as a Highways England, is kinetic charging, for example. What does that look like in the road surface? Might sound a great idea, but is it easily maintainable? Can it be done? Would it be digging up the surface a lot to do that? But it's good to look at these things. And we're not in isolation either, so we're looking across the world. We attend something called ITS World Congress, Intelligent Transport Systems. We've got very good links with the Dutch, with the Dutch government. Their department's called Rijkswaterstaat. I've been over there, they've been over here. They did a lot around smart motorways early on, so we've got very good links with them. But this is international. We're not kind of on our own on that. There's lots of kind of technology, kind of companies, and lots of media around this as well. If you kind of read the journals, it's really, really exciting what we can do, and what could be happening, over the next kind of 10, 20 years. I think in my career, I started all this in '86. I think this is the fastest change and probably the most exciting time in my career of thinking what these alternative futures might look like, and it might be subtly different in different countries as well, because that's a kind of big lesson I've learned as well, that it comes down to the culture of different countries. What's great for UK isn't maybe so great for India or South America or the US, for example. You know, we're a very tightly congested country. America's got lots of kind of open spaces. You got to look at the culture and what your citizens are ready for, and you can't ignore that.
Mm-hmm. No, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing that. Just my last question then, before we part, is what would be your top tip then for leaders? What's your top tip?
I think be authentic. That's what I've come down to. I think be yourself, trust in yourself, keep learning, definitely, but be yourself. And yourself will change. Recognize that you can move with the times, and that's to be kind of applauded if you do. So a lot of listening to your people, get some reflection, get some 360 out of them. How am I doing? You know, how are you feeling around it? But kind of be yourself and be yourself kind of every day as well. So it's kind of no surprises. The kind of Paul Unwin that's got to turn up tomorrow is probably like this one, probably a bit worse for wear maybe after a long weekend maybe. But be human, be empathetic, kind of listen, be understanding. Then your people will stay with you and will want you to succeed as well, and will want you to kind of lead them. There's that phrase, the best leaders, don't create followers, they create other leaders, and that's the kind of philosophy that I've always tried to bring.
That's some brilliant advice. Paul, thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for being a guest.
An absolute pleasure, thank you.